Namaste, and welcome to this explainer. Today we're unpacking a literal biological masterpiece, and it's happening inside you right at this very second. You know, we often think of respiration as just breathing, right? Just in and out, simple as that. But the source material we're looking at today completely redefines this whole concept. Respiration isn't just moving air around. It is a highly complex biological machine that's designed to charge the batteries of billions of cells in your body. It is literally the fire keeping you alive.
Now, what's really interesting here is this single number, 17%. We all know we breathe in oxygen, we breathe out carbon dioxide, sure, but the math behind it, it's actually going to blow your mind. The air we breathe in is about 21% oxygen, and most of us just assume our bodies soak all of that up like a giant sponge. But we don't. We actually only use a tiny fraction of it, and we exhale 17% of that oxygen right back out into the air. It's a massive, counterintuitive fact, and honestly, it's exactly why this is an absolute favorite trick question on biology exams.
So here is our roadmap for today. We're covering 1. The breath starting line, 2. The body's traffic control, 3. The gas exchange battlefield, 4. Hemoglobin, the oxygen taxi, 5. The cellular power plant, and finally 6. Extreme adaptations. We're going to map out the micro journey of a single breath using some mechanical analogies to make this complex biology totally unforgettable. Okay, let's dive into this with Section 1, the breath starting line. Looking at the intake numbers, the atmospheric air going in is 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and a tiny 0.03% carbon dioxide. But look at what happens on the way out. The nitrogen? It stays exactly at 78%. Our lungs literally have zero mechanism to use it, so it just gets a free round trip. But notice that crucial 4% shift. We take in 21% oxygen and exhale 17%, so that's a 4% drop. Meanwhile, carbon dioxide jumps from that microscopic 0.03% all the way up to 4%. That sudden spike in CO2? That is no accident. It is the literal factory smoke produced by our internal cells working tirelessly to generate energy. It absolutely has to be expelled. To really lock this into your memory for exams, use this simple trick. Nitrogen stays the same, oxygen drops by 4, CO2 gains by 4. It's just a perfect, simple way to permanently memorize the counterintuitive math of gas exchange.
But you know, before that air ever even reaches your lungs, it gets filtered. You've probably always been told to breathe through your nose, right? Well, here is the biological reason why. Your nasal cavity isn't just an empty tube, it's actually a premium, biological wet filter. It produces a massive half-liter, yes, 0.5 liters of mucus every single day. And this mucus acts like a sticky, microscopic conveyor belt. It traps dust, it warms up cold air so it doesn't shock your delicate lung tissue, and it catches bacteria. Then it flows down the back of your throat where you unknowingly swallow it, letting your stomach acid completely destroy those trapped invaders.
Moving on to Section 2, the body's traffic control.
The air takes a very specific 6-step journey here: nasal cavity, pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchi, and finally the alveoli. A clever little way to remember this sequence is: the nose breathed through the voice, down the windpipe, and gave the bronchi and alveoli. Now, as the air passes the larynx, which is your voice box, the pitch of your voice is physically determined by the length of your vocal cords. They're typically shorter in women, for a higher pitch, and longer in men, for a deeper pitch. Then the air hits the trachea. This tube is structurally reinforced with 16 to 20 C-shaped cartilage rings. These rings are super important because they ensure the tube never collapses under the pressure of a deep breath, kind of like a stiffened plastic straw.
And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer genius of our anatomy, the epiglottis. Right at the exact spot where the pathways for food and air cross sits this tiny little cartilage lid. It basically acts as the throat's strict traffic police. Every single time you swallow, your brain sends a lightning-fast signal, and the epiglottis reflexively snaps shut over your windpipe. This forces the food safely down into your stomach, completely keeping it out of your lungs.
Which brings up a really fascinating question. If this system is so flawless, why on earth do we get hiccups? Well, hiccups are essentially a biological multitasking error. If you're eating and talking at the exact same time, your brain gets distracted and it forgets to close the epiglottis in time. So a tiny crumb tries to enter the windpipe. Because your lungs are incredibly sensitive, they instantly trigger a defense mechanism. The diaphragm violently pushes a massive burst of air up to eject that intruder, which then slams right into your voice box. So that sudden hic, it isn't a glitch at all. It's literally a life-saving alarm system.
Let's head into Section 3, the gas exchange battlefield. So, the windpipe splits into two bronchi, which lead directly into our lungs. But here is a really fun architectural fact for you. Your lungs are not symmetrical, not at all. The right lung is larger and has 3 lobes. The left lung is noticeably smaller, with only 2 lobes. Why? Because nature is an expert packager. It deliberately made the left lung smaller to carve out just enough perfectly shaped real estate for your heart to sit comfortably right there in your chest.
Deep inside those lungs, the branches get smaller and smaller until they end in these microscopic grape-like clusters called alveoli. This is the ultimate battlefield for gas exchange. There are hundreds of millions of them. If you were to lay them all out completely flat, they would literally cover an entire tennis court. This massive surface area is exactly what allows oxygen to easily cross those thin walls directly into your bloodstream. Sadly, this delicate battlefield is exactly where the COVID-19 virus wreaks so much havoc, filling those tiny sacs with fluid and stopping that critical gas exchange dead in its tracks.
But remember, lungs are just passive, empty bags. They absolutely cannot pull air in by themselves. Doing 70% of the heavy lifting is a dome-shaped muscle sitting right beneath them called the diaphragm. It acts as a biological vacuum pump using Boyle's law. It pulls down, which increases the chest volume, drops the pressure, and air naturally rushes in to fill the void. But wait, what about pregnant women whose growing babies physically block the diaphragm from moving down? Biology adapts brilliantly here. The mother's body actually shifts mechanics, vigorously expanding her ribs outward and sideways to create that vital vacuum, making sure respiration never stops.
Let's move to and see how this builds in Section 4, hemoglobin, the oxygen taxi.
So hemoglobin is this iron-rich protein inside our red blood cells that basically acts as the ultimate oxygen taxi. It binds perfectly to oxygen in the lungs and drops it off at our cells. But the return trip with carbon dioxide, that is much trickier. The source material uses a great memory hook for exams, CO2's 3 rides. While hemoglobin acts as the sole taxi for oxygen, CO2 actually uses 3 different vehicles for its return trip. About 7 to 23% hitches a ride on hemoglobin, 7% dissolves directly in the blood plasma, but a massive 70% undergoes a chemical reaction to travel as bicarbonate ions. That specific fact right there, the 70% bicarbonate route, is a massive favorite for standardized tests, so keep it in mind.
But hemoglobin actually has a terrifying evolutionary flaw. If it is perfectly designed for oxygen, why does carbon monoxide kill us so easily in our sleep? At a molecular level, it's a catastrophic chemistry accident. Hemoglobin's shape has a 200 to 300 times stronger affinity for carbon monoxide than it does for oxygen, meaning if there is even a trace of carbon monoxide in the room, your hemoglobin will ignore the oxygen completely and latch right onto the poison. And because your body's choking alarm only triggers when CO2 levels rise, not when oxygen falls, people succumb to sweet sleep death in poorly ventilated spaces, slipping peacefully into a coma without ever even feeling like they are suffocating.
Which brings us to Section 5, the cellular power plant.
So the crucial point here is this number right here, 38. When oxygen finally meets the glucose from your food inside the cell, it ignites an internal fire known as cellular respiration. And the payout for all this hard work? 38 packets of pure biological energy, known as ATP. This right here is the fundamental energy currency that powers every single thought, heartbeat, and movement in your entire body. This energy production actually happens in 2 distinct stages, which you can memorize with this phrase: glycolysis in cyto, Krebs in mito. First, glycolysis splits the glucose right in the cell's fluid, yielding just 2 ATP. Then, the real furnace fires up inside the mitochondria, the famous powerhouse of the cell. Here, the Krebs cycle uses the oxygen to completely burn the glucose, generating the remaining 36 ATP. That's aerobic respiration. But what happens if you sprint suddenly and completely run out of breath? Your body actually switches to anaerobic respiration, producing only 2 ATP and a rather painful byproduct, lactic acid.
Students often remember this backup system as low O2, lactic bomb, body fatigue begins. That lactic acid rapidly builds up, causing severe muscle cramps. Now you might be thinking, why on earth would evolution create a backup system that causes us pain and gives so little energy? Well, because it's actually a brilliant survival tool. Think about it. If our ancestors were being chased by a lion and completely maxed out their lung capacity, their bodies had to find a way to give them just enough rapid energy to keep running, even without oxygen. The body gladly accepts the painful cramps of tomorrow just to make sure you survive today.
Finally, let's wrap up with Section 6, extreme breathing and adaptations.
Nature has engineered some incredibly diverse solutions for breathing across different species. Fish easily pull dissolved oxygen through their gills. Earthworms and frogs, they can actually exchange gases directly through their moist skin. Insects don't even have lungs at all. They use a complex network of tiny tubes called a trachea to deliver air straight to their tissues. Now, when humans push their limits, our biology gets a bit tricky. For instance, breathing 100% pure oxygen would actually poison us. Oxygen is highly reactive, and at 100%, it quite literally tears our cellular membranes apart, a dangerous condition called oxygen toxicity. This is exactly why scuba divers have to mix gases. And when deep sea divers go below 300 feet, they can't even use normal nitrogen because the extreme ocean pressure dissolves it straight into their blood. If they surface too fast, it bubbles up like opening a shaken soda bottle, causing a lethal condition called the bends. To survive this, they smartly swap nitrogen for helium, which is light enough to resist dissolving even under massive ocean pressure.
Which leaves us with this final thought. From the microscopic traffic police guarding your throat, to the hemoglobin taxis circulating in your blood, all the way to a backup energy system designed specifically to help you outrun predators, are we merely just breathing? Or are our bodies constantly, silently, and brilliantly engineering our survival with every single inhalation we take? It is a true biological marvel hiding right under our noses. Thank you so much for exploring it with us in this explainer, and we will see you next time.